Hello everybody, welcome back to part 3 in this series on the IELTS Writing Task 1. And today we're going to talk about adverbs for describing trends, and that means we're going to be focusing on describing these trends with more detail. So adverbs and modifiers, we use this to describe nuance, meaning maybe some minor details or some details. So we use some of these like sharply, dramatically, steadily, slightly, marginally, significantly, mildly. These are just some of them, but the important thing is that we pair these with verbs in order to describe rate and scales of change. Okay, an increase like this might be different from an increase like this or an increase like this. All right, these are very big differences. So we want to describe that using a verb and an adverb. So let's look back at this chart again. This is what we'll be dealing with and what we'll be writing about eventually. We see that the changes are not the same. This increase is different from this increase. And this decrease is very different from this decrease. We have some very different kinds of changes. So if you'll remember, these are the verbs that I mentioned in the last video. Here you can see all the 4 different movements that we have. For some of them, upward and downward, we're going to be able to use the same kinds of adverbs, but fluctuate and stay the same might have some special adverbs that we won't really get into too much today, just a little bit in some way. Okay, so here's what we're focusing on then. We're focusing on adverbs that show a big change and ones that show a little change. Okay, remember, the closer to vertical that a line is in a chart, the bigger the change. So some adverbs you might use would be sharply or dramatically, greatly, significantly, wildly, steeply, markedly. These are all adverbs to describe a big change, whereas steadily, slightly, marginally, mildly, or moderately could be used to describe a smaller change or just a very little, very, very small change, okay? So, looking again at this chart here, instead of using those simple verbs, why don't we use some verb plus adverbs? And this is what it would look like. Starting here, we've got climbed steadily, increased moderately, surged dramatically, then plateaued, dipped slightly, rose slightly. Here it rose sharply, and here it fell slightly. We see that it fluctuated mildly and then dropped moderately. You can use hover to show that it stayed within a range. So it's not exactly the same numbers, but it's similar numbers. So it hovered around the mid-40s or the mid-30s, then climbed steeply. Here it peaked, and then we could say it plummeted sharply, or it dropped sharply, and then plateaued. And then finally, for the last few points, it rose steadily. This is a much, much more detailed explanation of what is happening in this chart. And this is what you want to do if you want to get a high score on your test. That is all for today. So now we've talked about what the IELTS Writing Task 1, what some of the problems or mistakes people make are. We've talked about percentages. We've talked about how to analyze the chart, look for the information in it. And we've talked about verbs, nouns, and adverbs that can be used. All right. In the next video, we'll talk about how to avoid repetition when we're breaking down the chart into time. All right. Thank you very much for watching. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.